Hey y'all, happy Saturday. It's Krishan, the founder of Blaxit Global and the host of the Blaxit Global podcast. Hope you are having a wonderful Saturday. It is quite warm in New Jersey. It is supposed to get to like 94, 95, but I am safely home, air conditioned, and I plan to spend my afternoon doing just that. So, hope you're all doing well. Definitely let me know if you could that you can hear me and see me. That would be greatly appreciated. Um, we have a lot to talk about today. But of course, I want to acknowledge, there's a lot of heaviness collectively that many of us are feeling. It is, a week since the unfortunate shootings in Buffalo, and we're all trying to manage through those range of emotions. I sent out an email earlier this week to encourage people to talk it out. You can talk it out in the Blaxit Global community and Passport. Feel free to connect with other people, whether you are living abroad and having those feelings or you are aspiring to move abroad. Definitely want to make sure your mental health is paramount. To that end, we have a member of our Blaxit Global podcast, our Passport, community, Lynette, and she will be hosting a free meditation session tomorrow. So if you are following her, you'll see the link to that. If you're already in Passport, you have the information there, but please take advantage of that because it is very good to be centered. Also, to that end, this is why we are having one of the reasons why Blaxit Global exists is to give us opportunities to think outside the box, to know that wherever you call your native land, that doesn't mean that has to be your land permanently. And so today I'm really excited to reunite with a guest from the Blaxit Global podcast last season, Zoe Smith. She is the founder of the Exodus Collective. She lives in Grenada, but originally from the UK. You'll hear it in her lovely accent. And she will talk about why the Caribbean is an overlooked area, but should be a part of your Blaxit journey. So, with that said, I am going to bring her up. Hey, Zoe.
Hey, 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 how are you? Good to reconnect.
Yes, yes, yes. And I don't know if you could hear me when I was talking. It is like 94, 95 right now here. What's the temperature?
I just checked because I don't do Fahrenheit, I do Celsius, but apparently it's 89. So,
Whoa.
yeah, cooler
Yeah.
here than it is where you are. But it's not
Yeah.
cool.
No,
It's
it's
not
like,
cool.
now I'm feeling kind of like islandish, I guess, by temperature for
Yeah,
May. So.
celebrate it.
Yeah, so for the people who haven't heard your episode of the podcast or who have, and it's been some time, why don't we give them a little taste of who Zoe is?
Yeah, so as you can tell from the accent, I was born in the UK, and I've lived all over the world. I've lived in the UK, Scotland, Spain, Italy, but probably for the past 10 years or so, I've been working towards moving to the Caribbean, which is where my ancestry is. And in the process, thought I would just share what the process is like, what the region has to offer, because I think more and more folks like us are looking for places to be where we can just live well, live without a lot of the drama that really just doesn't need to be. And as someone who has spent most of my life in white spaces, I am appreciative for the opportunities that it has provided me with, but also, yeah, I just reached the point where I was like, no, enough. I don't I don't need to. I'm not a minority. My people are the global majority, and there are many places in the world where I can choose to be, where I don't have to deal with yeah, that stuff, and where I can show my children that there's a different way of moving through the world as well. So that's
Mhm.
me. I'm Zoe. I'm a mum. I'm a journalist by trade, but I'm also someone who's very happy to be living in the West Indies.
Yes. And when we had our conversation, you had just about first kind of gotten there and settled and, rewinding last year, there were obviously a lot of dynamics. I myself was dealing that with my daughter being homeschooled for part of that. Your children were also in the midst of making that transition as well. And so I'm really excited to have an opportunity to just kind of see what that adjustment period has been like for them. But definitely, for people who are geographically challenged, I include myself in that. You talked about the Caribbean and the West Indies. For people who are, again, geographically challenged, what kind of countries encompass or qualify as the Caribbean?
So the Caribbean, I would say, is from the ABCs, Abaco, Curacao, etc., all the way down south to Trinidad. I would say that is the Caribbean. I would say my specific niche is the West Indies, which is a even smaller chain of islands going from Haiti down to Trinidad. And the West Indies, I would say, is typically the islands that are part of CARICOM or former British colonies. So if you're looking to move to the US Virgin Islands, I'm probably not the best person for you. If you are looking to move to, I've had a few conversations about Curacao, but I think there are over 2,000 islands in the Caribbean.
Wow, I had no idea.
Yeah, some of them for sale. So if you've got a lot of money, if you don't have there are options.
Right? It's like, look, I'm looking at that Blaxit nest egg. I'm like, okay now.
On an island. But yeah, the English-speaking islands that were previously British colonies, those are the areas that I tend to focus on. And what I do is just share the stories of people who've made their moves, what they had to put in place, what the challenges were, what they've learned from the process, just so that other people can perhaps see themselves in their shoes. Because it helps to know that people like us can move, that you don't have to wait until you're retired. You don't need $1 million in the bank. You can move if you're a single parent, which is what I am. There's 1,000,001 ways to make your move.
Absolutely. And I think that your story resonates with so many people. And also, as a single parent myself, while my children on the older side of the spectrum, my son's almost 22 and my daughter's almost 17, they won't be journeying with me when I move abroad. That said, for people who have young children at home and might even think that that's something that they have to delay, your story kind of illustrates that it is possible to make that move and that transition with children.
Yeah, definitely. I would say don't delay. I mean, it depends how. I mean, everyone's different, but I think past the age of 4 or 5, they're so portable. And in a way, the longer you wait, the more complicated it can become.
Yes.
Forever, which I'm experiencing with my 11-and-a-half-year-old. But yeah, everyone's different. Take time to reflect on it, but just don't limit yourself. I think once
Exactly.
you do it, you can make it work.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. So I want to make a little pause before we go into the questions some more because I see, the comments are lighting up. And so I want to acknowledge folks that are here. Hello, hello. Weather's always a consideration when I think of my Blaxit. Are hurricanes a major concern in the Caribbean? Ooh, that's a good one.
Yeah, hurricanes are a significant concern, but there are islands that you can move to that are outside of the hurricane belt. So, for example, the Bahamas, as you well know, it's frequently passed over. Same for folks who live in Florida. You're kind of aware that these things happen quite often. But towards the end of the chain, so Grenada, Trinidad, St. Vincent, those islands are considered outside of the hurricane belt, which is why you typically see people with yachts coming down here during hurricane season because the insurance providers will allow their insurance to continue outside of the zone. I think Curacao and some of the Dutch islands are also outside of the belt because they're slightly off towards the east, west, I don't know, but they're not in the center.
Yes, I've been to Curacao, and that is outside of the belt. That was one of
Right.
the reasons why I went. I think it was around hurricane season, but I deliberately chose one of the ABCs because I was like, oh, I want something outside the belt. So that's a great
Yeah.
question.
And also times of year. So hurricane season is from May, June to November. So there's times of year that it's more likely that you'll face a hurricane. And if you're someone who can be a digital nomad, being in the Caribbean for just part of the year or half of the year, then yeah, making sure that you're outside of times when hurricanes are likely to pass is a way of avoiding that issue.
And that's one of the things that I learned, especially since I created this platform, is it's helped me in my own journey. I was thinking very linearly about, where I was going and, what I was bringing and how long. And as I've had, more and more conversations, I think that's the beauty of this is like, you learn different things. It's like you don't have to
Mhm.
stay there all year. There's people that live in certain parts of the world that, for Bali, for example, that I'll be going to in July, they have a rainy season. So most of the time, expats will venture off to some other country for, part of that. And so it's just being able to allow yourself to sit in the land of imagination and kind of explore like, okay, you know what? If there were no rules, like where would I go? What's calling my heart? I definitely know as I've gotten older, I am not a fan of winter.
Yeah. And I think that's the thing. There are no rules. You've been told that there are, but there really aren't. So once you decide what you need to do, then you can put the steps in place to make it happen. We used to live in Ibiza, and there people would spend 6 months there during the peak season, and then most people would either go to India or to Bali. And that was the first time I was like, "Whoa, you don't have to spend 12 months in one place." That's interesting. What would I do if I could move like that? So, yeah,
Right?
it's just about raising our awareness of options and yeah, following through.
Exactly, exactly. So I see Lynette is there. Hey, Lynette. And Lynette and I went and did a live when we were in Portugal together. I see Olson's there. Hey, happy Saturday. All right. Oh, wow. So congrats. Mindfulness Consulting Business represents Caribbean coastal heritage of Grenada, where my parents are from and I grew up. I consider Grenada my true home. Oh, that is awesome. Awesome. It's one of the places I definitely want to visit for sure. And I love both of your platforms. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'd love to hear more about that business. Drop some more in the
Yes, please. We want to keep this interactive, so
Mhm.
definitely continue the conversation. Um, is there a low season? That's a great question. Um,
Low season as in terms of pricing costs. I'm imagining so.
I would
Um,
imagine.
so I would say the most affordable time of year to come here is um, May, June.
Mm,
So that's the start of rainy season, hurricane season. But I think the probability of there being a hurricane in May, June is incredibly slim. But it's also before the school vacations. So come June, school vacations, prices go up. August is when we have carnival. That's when prices really go up. Um, September, October can be affordable, but it's pretty rainy. It can be quite wet. So if you're coming to guarantee that you can lie on a beach or go hiking without getting a downpour, I think May, June would be the time. Like winter, like from November to April, that's peak season because the weather's good.
mm.
There's no chance of hurricanes, and everyone is escaping the cold in North America and Europe. So May, June is what I would recommend.
Yeah, and to that end, a lot of people think about the Caribbean and they think or have been to the Caribbean on a vacation, or they think about, island living and that it's just nice for that. And,
Mm-hmm.
you obviously live all year round. And for somebody who lives there primarily, um, it's different when you're vacationing versus when you're planning on moving. So for people who are considering moving abroad and you have a country in mind, definitely I'm a huge advocate of scouting trips because you get to get an idea of what feels right and what doesn't. But then to that end, sometimes you want to go on those like non-ideal times because you kind of want to get a sense of it and get like the shock value over and done with. So like if crowds aren't your thing or the rain isn't your thing, you kind of know and you go in eyes wide open versus, kind of settling in this most optimal time of year to visit. And then later on, you're like, oh, I didn't know this was going to happen. So definitely, if you're thinking about the Caribbean, plug in to Zoe, get the information that you need, continue to ask questions on our live because it's really important. Um, so you had talked about the beach living, so islands. Which islands have the most accessible public beaches? Great question, because I'm a beach girl.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good question. So I know that in some islands, like in Jamaica, in certain areas, not the entire island, um, but if a hotel builds a beach or builds a hotel, they can also buy the beach. So once they
Hmm.
bought the beach, the public don't necessarily have access to that.
Wow.
In Grenada, all beaches are public. Even so, there from my house, I can see what's it, Calavini Island. It's an island owned by a billionaire. It's where Melissa Gates went to go and recuperate after she split up from Bill. Like it's a celebrity island. It's lush and amazing, but that beach is public.
Oh, wow.
It's a like I don't know $50,000 a night island, but because the rules of Grenada say no, beaches are public, you cannot own the beach. People
Wow.
can go there. You might get sort of moved along by a security guard, but legally, there's nothing to stop you from accessing the beach, which I think is really important. You know, like
Yes.
given what the people on these lands have had to go through slavery wise, given what they've had to go through in terms of their struggles for independence, to then be in a situation where you can't even sit on your own beach, where you
Yeah.
can't even walk into the water, to me, that's absolutely nuts. Um, so I think for the majority of the islands, access to the beach isn't prohibited, but I know that in some areas in Jamaica it can be if the land is private. But I can definitely say that for Grenada, access to the beach is not an issue. And if anyone tried to say that it would be, they would lose an election. It's just a non-starter. People would not give up their access to the beach.
Yeah, I wouldn't be a fan of like if I had it and then you say I can't have it, like that's gonna be a problem. And in New Jersey, gosh, you have to pay like every time you go on the beach.
Really? Why? How?
It's ridiculous. And every year it goes up. And I haven't been, I used to go every weekend. And since COVID, I have not journeyed to the beach down by the shore. But the last time I checked, it was 100 for the season. And
Wow.
we have a super short season. And that's my nearest beach, which is about an hour and 10 minutes or so without traffic. But if you go further down, I used to rent a house with my children were younger in Cape May Point, and you had to pay to go on the beach. Or if the house that you had, if you were fortunate enough that the house that you rent had beach passes, you could use those. But yeah, they charge for everything. It's public beach.
Wow.
It's charged. Yeah.
That's unbelievable. And what's best, what I love about Grenada and a few other islands as well, is that you have the beach to yourself. Like there's times where
Mm.
we go to our local beach, my son says, "Why are there people on our beach?" I'm like, "Well, one, it's not our beach. Two, it's a public beach." But you just get used to an entire beach to yourself. I remember when I lived in Ibiza, being on like party beaches, lying down and people stepping over my head. It was that busy. I'm like, this is no way to enjoy nature.
Yeah.
Where here, yeah, you can just have the beach to yourself. Maybe a local fisherman might rock up with his catch, but that's about it.
Whoa. Oh
It's
my gosh.
it's
That
really cool.
is so dreamy, so dreamy, so dreamy. And also too, like I wanted to talk about like for people who have this perception of like island living, like
Mhm.
what is island living? Because again, if you've been in the United States and you've been on this or wherever you're living, but if you're in the Western world and you're used to that hamster wheel, grind, 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 hustle culture, fast pace, and if you're fortunate enough to take a beat, go on a vacation, unplug, um, what is that like on a day-to-day basis, like island living? Because sometimes people kind of like discount living on an island because it's only been something like they don't want to slow down too much or can't even comprehend the idea of slowing down. So what has it been like?
Yeah, I mean, I think it really varies. I think that's the perspective I have of moving, but also running the Exodus Collective, is that because it does cover the range of the West Indies, you can get a different experience in each location. So, for example, I also fall into the mistake of saying the Caribbean, the islands, but you also have Belize, which isn't an island, that's very jungly. Sorry.
No, no worries.
Yeah, sorry, I've got a daughter who's just a 5-year-old who's just walked in with a face full of makeup. I pretended not
Oh my gosh.
to let her go. She looks like an Oompa Loompa. So yeah, you can have the jungle experience in Belize. You can have like move to somewhere like Jamaica or Trinidad where there's a really strong business scene that's very thriving. There's lots going on in terms of property. If that's what you want, you can go for that. Or you can move to one of the smaller islands, the slower islands, like I'd say St. Vincent, Grenada, um, to a large extent, certain aspects of St. Lucia, where it is slower, where, you can go to a restaurant and order a salad, and it might take 45 minutes for them to bring you a bowl of lettuce. And that does require some adjustment. But I think hopefully in the process of moving, you're really clear as to what it is that you want from this move, which is going to come with pros and cons. So,
Mhm.
yes, you want a slower pace of life, but understand perhaps that the people around you are also going to move at a slower pace, which could be triggering it sometimes. So, that's an adjustment. Um, in Grenada, St. Vincent, specifically, I would say possibly St. Kitts and Nevis too. In terms of you're like into, you have a bad day and you take it out by shopping, like your options are going to be a lot more limited here because in terms of malls and designer stores, there's a lot less of that. If that's something that is important to you, then Barbados has lots of designer high-end shops. In
Mm.
Jamaica, there are options. Trinidad too has a really creative, um, artisanal scene, I would say. So it just depends. It depends. I think my Grenada for me is very. It's quite pared back.
Mhm.
Canadians might be upset at me for saying that, but if you've traveled anywhere else in the world, it's it's I don't even know how to put it into words, but it's slower, it's simpler in terms of what you can purchase and what you can consume. But
Mm.
in terms of the nature, it's abundant, it's
Oh my
extremely
gosh.
rich. That thing of just like driving down the road and the intensity of the greenery of the nature, like seeing the mountains and the blue of the sea and the sky, like that's rich. So if you're willing to give up on the consumer side and be held by the nature side, then it's a good payoff.
You mean there's a world that doesn't have like, billboards staring you at the face and neon signs and concrete everywhere? You mean there's a place where you can, feel the warmth of the sun and breathe clean air and look at the sky and, dare to dream?
Yeah, there is. And I think also the other thing when you say island life, people kind of think, the beaches, lying down, someone playing steel pans, drinking a pina colada or whatever, which you can do. But I think the longer I stay here, the more Grenada in particular, and also other islands from having similar conversations. It's just really culturally rich, beyond carnival, beyond like feathers and sequins. Um, there's been a lot that's gone on here, and the people who survived and the stories that they brought with them, the traditions that they brought with them. I think it's finding time to tap into that and acknowledge that is really quite exciting. And I think more and more people are becoming open to exploring like the heritage of the Caribbean beyond the like singing, dancing, let's entertain you type stuff.
Yes, exactly. There's definitely a lot to offer. So, Chai wants to know, what is the healthcare system like? Great
But
question.
healthcare systems, I've had episodes of needing healthcare here. I came here when I was pregnant in 2015, stayed for 6 months, and honestly, my experience of dealing with midwives here far outstrips my experience in the UK. People
Mm.
actually have time to speak to you. They're not sort of pushing you through the door. They're advising on what to eat, what local dishes to get your iron supplement up. So, from that aspect, it was impressive. I also think the maternal death rate is far lower here than it is in the UK, which is pretty appalling considering that the UK is supposed to be a developed country. But also that on the other aspect, um, the healthcare system here can also leave quite a lot to be desired. So, for example, if you ever find yourself needing that, I mean, also, I'm speaking as a Brit who's used to paid for, I mean, free healthcare. I know I'm speaking to Americans, so you guys are used to forking out for stuff. So
Ooh,
I
tell
have
me
to
about
take
it.
that, I have to take that into context. So I was going to say, if you need dialysis, you have to pay $250 a time. So quite often people are going to need that 3 times a week. If you
Mhm,
can't afford that, it's essentially a death sentence. Um, I would say I would not want to have a medical emergency in Grenada. If I
mm,
did and there was no other option, I would touch wood and hope that I was going to be fine. But I think the healthcare system here is something that puts a lot of people off moving, particularly people who are older, so more predisposed to having medical issues,
mhm,
and those who have underlying conditions or ongoing conditions that are going to need repeated medical care. So I think if you are thinking about moving, um, and you do have pre-existing conditions, definitely check out what facilities are there on the island. Health insurance obviously is a must. There are services where you can, in the case of emergency, be airlifted to another island, to Barbados or
mm,
Trinidad, the US or the UK. But yeah, it's not. There's room for improvement. I can't lie. There's definitely room for improvement on the healthcare side.
mhm. But healthcare is really important. I had earlier this year emergency surgery, unexpected. Wound up in the hospital for 4 days. And when I came back from my scouting trip to Portugal, $4,000 worth of bills, even after I paid them $1,100 before they even saw me. So, our healthcare system in the United States is sucks. And that's me with good insurance, right? So all that is to say is definitely spend some time, thinking about and researching healthcare, because that is one of the higher costs that are variable costs that can occur when you're moving abroad, when you're aging abroad, and things like that. And then the accessibility, the quality is going to be important, and also knowing your conditions. If you have
Mhm.
pre-existing conditions, if you anticipate needing further treatment or regular medications, that's definitely something that should be top of mind. That's a great
Yeah,
question.
and I think Barbados and Trinidad would be the standout islands for healthcare in the Caribbean. Those two.
That's great. Olson, hey Olson. I was just in the Dominican Republic. I found it to be slow paced, which I liked. Very distinct to London and New York City. Olson's in London. How do you find the pace? Do you think other expats find it difficult to adjust? Great question.
Speaking of Grenada, the pace is slow, but I think it's so blindingly slow that there should be no reason why someone moves to Grenada and complains about being slow. Like it's slow from the moment you arrive in the airport, you know it's slow. So if you choose to move here, you're moving to somewhere that is slow. It's not going to like sneak up on you. Um, and yeah, it can. That being said, it there are moments where you're like in a supermarket line and you're like, how can they scan these items so slowly? Or you're waiting for a government document and it's like 3 days past the time it says on their own website they're supposed to give it to you, and they're looking at you like, why are you stressing? Um, but you just, again, it's just, you take the rough with the smooth, and that, the
Hmm.
island rough compared to London rough or New York City rough probably isn't that much to complain about. I think, you just, it's a process. It's definitely a process adjusting to it. Um,
Mhm. Yeah.
and I think it require, unless you're like moving from the middle of nowhere to the Caribbean, if you come from a developed country or a city, whatever, there are moments that it's gonna require an adjustment, but that's just part of the process. It's part of the growth. Yeah.
Absolutely. And it gets back to what you were talking about, just being clear on your purpose and your why. Your why is going to sustain you on those days where, you arrive at the airport and there's a long line to go through
Mhm.
control, or like you said, there's a document that you're waiting on and it seems like it's taking forever. You will be challenged continually along your journey and being clear on like, okay, yeah, this might not be ideal, but things not to do is say, oh, I wish they did it like they do here. Why can't they do it like they do here? You have to challenge yourself and understand what is it that you came for.
Yeah.
What are your reasons to move abroad? And um, what are you seeking? What quality of life are you seeking? And if that's the worst thing that can happen is being in line a little too long or taking a little longer than normal, it's better than, the alternative, what we've been
Mm-hmm.
dealing with, you know, for a long time in the States. Um, so I guess it gets to a question about safety. Most of the time I travel solo, but sometimes I do group travel. But what is it like, and how have you been able to adjust being in the Caribbean with your children? Definitely, like you said, coming from the UK, how have you felt? And even, you can go as far as your children in terms of safety, just overall safety.
Yeah. Well, again, I think if that, for me personally in Grenada, I can speak for myself, but I do know that the situation does vary from island to island. So that's just one thing I just want to make a disclaimer.
Correct. No blanket statements.
Yeah, but in Grenada, like it's for sure that's one of the reasons that I made the move. Like my son is turning 11, no, turning 12. He's at the age where he would be going to what we call secondary school in the UK.
Mm,
I would have to worry about whether, I mean, I didn't live in a bad area, but I would have to worry about whether he was going to get mugged, whether he was going to be a victim of knife crime, like that sort of
mhm.
random violence. In the UK, it's knife crime more than gun crime. But you just never know. You never know. Um, Here, that is not a thought that would ever cross my mind. Um, it just isn't. It just isn't. Sometimes you see on the news like this child has gone missing, and they're found like 6 hours later. Like that's probably the worst that you would hear. It's safe. As a woman, I feel safe. I feel it's exceptionally liberating. It's exceptionally liberating. My children are not in my house. They're somewhere outside. I don't know where they are, but I know that they're safe because people look out for each other.
Mm,
There's that genuine concern. And when you do have an instance of kids misbehaving at the bus terminal or whatever, someone might record it and put it on Facebook, and there's this national scandal. Like, how can children behave like this? Something needs to be done. They're disgracing the nation. Like that sense of ownership of
yeah.
everyone
Mhm.
playing a part in like educating children, and it's markedly different from what it's like in the UK and I imagine in the US. And that investedness,
Mm.
um, it makes a difference. I like the idea that my kids are going to grow up here. They might not like it at times. They might not know that people know who they are or know whose parent to tell when they mess up. But yeah, it's just it's safe and it's supportive, which is definitely not something I would have said of my almost 40 years living in the UK.
Wow. And see, for me, I grew up in the Bronx, and where I grew up in Co-op City, it was at that time, it was wonderful. I had, my brothers are older. I'm sure one of my brothers will probably be on there in the comments. Sometimes he pops in here. But it was a time where, like, you didn't want to act up because, somebody's watching you and they
Mhm.
know your parent. And I lived on the 30th floor of a 33-story building. And I remember I would like look up and then I could see like my dad or my mom's little head, and like kind of keeping an eye on me all the way up there. Um,
Mhm.
but that was like always in the back of my mind. And, fast forward now, it's like, children a lot of times, run amok and there's nobody who's like, hey, reeling them in or, being that village. And
Yeah.
so when I go to other countries and I see that like slower pace lifestyle, it speaks to my heart space, and I'm like, wow, if I could run the clock backwards and play things differently, that is what I would do. I would give my children the gift of having that level of safety and freedom to just be, right?
Yeah.
To be kids, to experiment, to play, and to also know that somebody else is keeping an eye on them, that village is there to nurture and support them. So that's really fabulous. That's really fabulous.
Yeah, no, especially as a single parent, it's not so sustainable doing every single thing on your own. It's really not. So to be somewhere where it is a little bit more community input. I mean, not massively, but significantly enough of a difference to what I'm used to. It feels good.
Yes,
Feels good.
I can imagine. I can imagine. So let's see if it's coming up. Okay, glass half full. What about the Wi-Fi speed in homes, hotels, cafes? So I'm sure that's a digital nomad.
Mhm.
Or look, we all use Wi-Fi. I mean, goodness
Yeah.
gracious.
Yeah. So Wi-Fi speeds in the Caribbean are generally pretty good. There was one island which is an exception, and I don't want to call the wrong name just in case I get like hate speech. Um, but no, in Grenada, the lowest package you would pay for using Flow, which is owned by Cable and Wireless,
Mm.
is 50 megabytes per second. Uploads of 50 megabytes per second, which I think is pretty good. Digicel has a fiber broadband package which can go up to 250 megabytes per second
Oh,
upload,
wow.
so that's super fast.
Mhm.
But it's only available in certain areas of the main parish, which is St. George's. And in most islands, you'll find that the main telephone and broadband providers are either Digicel or Flow. Some countries might have both. But yeah, Wi-Fi, it's not as much of an issue as you would think it is. The Wi-Fi here is better than it is in the UK.
Wow. Oh my gosh. I'm
Yeah.
sold.
And it
Uh,
doesn't go out. It doesn't go out. But what woe betides you, you have to deal with customer service because that's
oh
when you
my
get the Caribbean flavor. So just pay your bills on time. Avoid people. The Wi-Fi is perfect.
That's awesome. So, how easy or difficult is it to establish residency? Great question.
Yeah, so again, that varies from island to island. What you have quite commonly, or probably about 7 or 8 destinations, Dominica, Barbados, Anguilla, Antigua, Curacao, um, and a few others are digital nomad visas. So I think the Caribbean, in a way, has kind of made its name through digital nomad visas. And as the pandemic is changing, let's say, they're offering opportunities for those visas to be extended,
Mm.
and then varying from island to island, whether it's 3 years or 5 years, you'll then have the opportunity to apply for residency. So you can apply for temporary residency. Um, in Grenada, after 3 years, I believe, permanent residency. You can apply for permanent residency after 5, I think. In St. Kitts and Nevis, um, they have situations where if you buy a house that's valued over 350 US dollars, that allows you to apply for residency. So it really does vary from island to island. Um, but typically, what you would do is either have a digital nomad visa that you would extend or pay to extend your tourist visa. And after a certain amount of time, you can apply for temporary residency and then permanent residency. But I'm always curious to understand why people want residency, because I think sometimes people hold that out as a something that they need when they might not need it. So it might be worth checking.
Is it that you can stay like, or I guess maybe it depends, or does that depend like on your passport? Obviously the duration that you can stay in a country may be determined or will be determined by your passport. But it sounds like, or am I misinterpreting that it's not necessarily necessary to go all the way to residency?
Yeah, so like my kids, they don't have Grenadian citizenship. They just have a British passport. So I pay to extend their tourist visa. It costs 75 EC, which is about 28 US per month to extend. Um, yeah, so they don't need residency.
Wow. Oh my gosh. Wow. I had no idea. All I
Yeah.
can
And I
say.
think pretty much all of the islands will allow you to do that, to extend your tourist visa.
Mm.
So, and then also if you buy property, then there'll be other options available to you. So yeah, just do your research and check what you what you think residency will give you. And there might be alternatives that are less cumbersome that will still allow you to stay there for a significant amount of time.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. So the follow up to the question was about affordability and planning to do a scouting trip. That is awesome. Congratulations. Congratulations. That's
Yeah, I would suggest May. Go for May. May's a good time.
That's right, right? Put your, I always have these things in like Skyscanner and Hopper, places I want to go, or trying to figure out, what's the shortest flight and most and
Mhm.
least expensive. Um, so, if you're coming to stay there temporarily, are folks using Airbnb or other rentals? Great question. A lot of
Yeah,
things in flux with Airbnb for sure.
right. Yeah, I would say temporarily. I would suggest using an Airbnb for
Hmm.
your first 2 or 3 weeks. And then once you're here locally and you've got a better sense of the areas, then seeing if you can negotiate something, whether it's with a local estate agent, finding people through word of mouth. I think definitely if you're going to be staying anything longer than a month, you really want to see where you're staying, I would suggest. So at least having the Airbnb as a sort of halfway house to then allow you to make a decision for a longer period of time. I definitely recommend that. And also speaking to a few lawyers as well, they've said, don't sign a contract for something that you haven't seen. Um,
Mm.
and Airbnb is pretty good as a sort of, if anything goes wrong, there's someone on hand. Whereas if something goes wrong with a rental contract, the last thing you want to do in the Caribbean is have to get into a legal dispute because that could take much, much longer than your stay on the island. So, yeah,
Wow.
Airbnb is what I'd recommend initially.
So, transportation, like for me, when I think about where I want to have my future home, I don't want a car.
Yeah.
I want a place that's really walkable. How is it, at least, where you are? Is it car dependent, a mixture of both? Can you have like the best of both worlds, or what is that like?
Like a lot of people here don't have cars,
Hmm.
and there is a bus system that will take you around most parts of the island. Um, but I definitely feel like a car helps, like just being able to go off the beaten track. Also, there are no buses that run on Sundays. So if you want
Oh,
to do
okay.
anything on Sunday, you need someone to give you a lift, or you need to be happy with staying at home. Or you could live in an area that's walkable. So in the capital, St. George's, there are definitely residential areas that are central, so you can walk around. But
Wow.
I would definitely recommend folks looking to be based in Grenada to get a car, but a lot of people don't. A lot of people don't.
Hmm.
I think Barbados has a much better bus infrastructure, so they run on Sundays, they run for longer times.
Hmm.
Jamaica too has many more options, and probably St. Lucia as well. Um, but definitely some of the smaller islands, the bus services can be limited in terms of times of day,
Mhm.
um, the days of the week, and also taxis can be extortionate. So
Wow, that was gonna be my question, like, what is that like? Is it when I went to, Costa Rica for my scouting trip in October, I got a rude awakening when, I found out that Uber was illegal. I mean, it runs, like, people do it, but, it definitely felt like I was participating in, like, a drug deal or something like that because they were, like, trying to hurry me in the car, and then the police would come to the car and like look in, and so you had to take your mask off to look like you were just hanging out with the driver, not that you're a passenger. Like there was a whole lot of energy. And also, I remember the drivers telling me like, to be very relaxed because they confiscate your car, the
Mm.
car, and they'll leave the passenger on the road.
Oh
It's like
no.
$3,000 to get the car. Oh yeah, they were all the Uber drivers were nerved up in Costa Rica.
Wow.
So I know that ride shares are not always widely available, but do you find like there's ride share there, or is that not something that has really permeated into that area yet?
No, I mean in Grenada at least there is some app. I've never used it. Um,
Hmm.
I've never used it, but something does exist. How reliable and timely it is, uh, is probably up for debate. But stuff. I mean, I think at some point they're going to have to. There's a general election coming up, and the
Okay.
opposition party is talking about sort of introducing some sort of Uber-like system. So I think eventually it will happen, but things here move a lot more slowly than they do in the US and the UK.
Hmm. And let's see. Looking for an island that's beautiful and vibrant, a buzz but not too busy. Any suggestions? Great question, April.
Do you know what? Even though I'm in Grenada, I think St. Lucia is the Caribbean island for everyone.
Really?
Yeah, it's beautiful. You can have like your empty beaches, but there's a lot going on. Like its tourism offering is quite developed. There's
Mm.
a range of restaurants. There's a lot going on in terms of nightlife, and it's buzzy. I wouldn't. Grenada can be buzzy, but it depends what your tastes are. Whereas St. Lucia is just buzzy, and I think St. Lucia is always like, if you don't know where you want to go to the Caribbean, you just want a little bit of everything. I always say St. Lucia is worth exploring, and they do have a digital nomad visa.
Oh, nice. Yeah, those nomad visas got real popular during the pandemic. And I think it's going to stay that way. My personal opinion, I think it's going to stay that way. And I definitely commend, those countries. And really, the Caribbean was, from my observation, was out in front of that. Just,
Mm,
being able to take the opportunity and say, hey, this is what we see. Things are changing very quickly in terms of people's work habits. But even as, in the States, there's a push toward more of a hybrid ways of working. I haven't been in an office in over 2 years, loving it. There's definitely this kind of tug of war between, wanting people to get back to, what was, to recognizing, what is, and just how people just do not want to go back to that way of working.
yeah, definitely. I mean, and Barbados is always there. Barbados is like probably the one of the most well known Caribbean islands. But I think, yeah, I think there are if you want like a lot of Caribbeanness, if you want that vibe, I would. I would say St. Lucia over Barbados, but Bajans in the feel free to tell me I'm wrong. Champion, school me.
Let's see. Do you need to be vaccinated to visit or move to any islands?
Yeah, so of the 15 CARICOM islands, they will all have their own regulations.
Hmm.
I know in Grenada, you do not require a vaccination, you do not require a negative COVID test. You can just rock up and come here without any restrictions. Um, that will vary from island to island, though. So definitely check, and definitely check what the COVID rates are like, because even though they might be allowing you in, you might not necessarily want to go. So check,
Hmm.
check,
That
check
is
that.
important. And, if you're planning on doing a scouting trip, you just know that you always have to test in order to come back into the United States.
Yeah.
I did EMED, which was clutch because I did not want to worry about trying to, which was a frustration point when I did my scouting trip to Costa Rica. That was my first, well, I shouldn't say my first international trip since the pandemic, because I did go to Australia and New Zealand right before lockdown, that February. But since like the lockdown, just navigating, finding the testing center, getting there on time, and that whole thing. And I was like, okay, I don't want to do that again when I go to Portugal. So I did EMED, which is a test through Abbott. And all I had to do is scan my little phone on a little QR code. Person watches me take my test, self administered. 15 minutes later, my results, they look at it, they read it, boom, send it to the airline. 2 seconds later, they were like, okay, you're good. And I was like, what? I did it in my Airbnb a couple
Wow.
hours before my flight. So definitely recommend it. I tell everybody, take the guesswork out of it. I think it's emed.com.
Mm,
And you'll be good to go. So yeah, and it's the only test that I know of that you can self-administer that the all airlines will accept.
definitely
Awesome.
good to know.
Yeah. Let's see, let me make sure I got to all of the questions there. And then I'm looking at my own question. So, what do you think? Like, actually, I know what I want to ask you. Because one of the things that I always find really inspiring about those of us that are in the process of making the journey, as well as those like you who have, is this kind of desire to give back. And so I want to give an opportunity because I think we kind of talked around it a little bit to talk about the Exodus Collective and why it's important and what you do to service the community. So, can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so the Exes Collective, basically, it just started off as a storytelling exercise platform, just to share the journeys of people who've made the move to the Caribbean. Because I think there was a lot about moving to the motherland, whether you wanted to move to Ghana or Benin or Senegal. There seemed to be a lot there, which is awesome. And at some point, I might move to Ghana, like you never know. But I kind of felt that the Caribbean was kind of being slept on. And that there were many reasons why people should understand like what it's like to move to an island and to see themselves in the position of being able to move to an island. Um, one, because I think it's a fantastic region to be, but also because over multiple decades, folks have moved to the US and moved to the UK. And I think it's about time some of that brilliance and talent and everything flows back, because I think there's unemployment is really high, healthcare is not amazing in many islands. So I think there's lots of scope for collaboration and
Hmm.
fresh blood. Um, so that was really what inspired it, and what made me have to do it was probably a few weeks after the murder of George Floyd, a friend calling me and saying, listen, we should do something about this. That urgency of just people needing to be elsewhere,
Yeah.
people reaching breaking point, people realizing that actually no, this we don't have to deal with this every day. It just felt necessary to kind of open up this little portal to like, yeah, there are these islands, and you might want to go there and buy an island, or you might want to go to Belize where you can live on virtually nothing at all. There are many different ways to get out, but just to raise awareness of getting out. Um, so yeah, it started off as a YouTube channel with, I think we probably got about 60 interviews or so, um, which cover all different, like the practical, the emotional, the spiritual,
Mhm.
all different aspects of moving. I've started sharing a bit more about my experiences of living in Grenada, which has definitely been interesting because on an island of 100,000 people, it's quite interesting how many people have actually seen my videos and will stop me in the street and say,
No
"Ha,
way. Oh
are
my
you the
God.
lady from YouTube?" I'm like, "Yeah, yeah." And they don't always love it, so that's, yeah, it can get a bit spicy at times.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, but what I've also started doing is actually just hosting some workshops so
Hmm.
people can get the practical ins and outs of what does it look like to move to an island? What does it mean in terms of residency? What are the business opportunities? Where should I buy property? You know, the kind of nuts and bolts type stuff.
Mhm.
That is quite often at the forefront of people's minds. So we have one for Grenada, which we did, which was really great. We had someone from the industrial development department giving people information on how to start a business. I also had one for St. Kitts and Nevis because that tends to, for some reason, it's a very popular destination, perhaps for folks looking to buy second passports.
Wow.
Um, so we did one there. So yeah, slowly working our way through the Caribbean, giving people practical information on how to move. But I think, kind of as you said a few times, like that understanding of purpose really is the main thing that excites me, I think.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, April wanted to know, and you know what? I like that question as well because the mosquitoes love me. So, is it a bad mosquito situation or is it like decent?
Um, so I don't wear mosquito repellent. I don't wear
Wow.
mosquito, but probably because I've been coming here regularly for the past 10 years. I think in some ways it's mind over matter. If you decide not to itch them, they're not going to itch you. That's
Mm.
for mosquitoes. Sandflies, on the other hand, are like a living death. I don't know if you, I think you
No,
guys,
what is that?
you call them no-see-ums? No-see-ums, is that what you call them? Or that's what people in the South call them. They're like you can't see them, but they itch like hell. Um, so yeah, mosquitoes are fine. They're loud though. They don't bother me biting me, but the ones here are exceptionally loud. So that
No
tends to be
way.
what wakes me up at 5 in the morning. But
Wow. Oh
yeah,
my gosh.
mosquitoes. My kids were getting bitten quite badly by mosquitoes when they first arrived. But again, I think your body just adjusts.
Mm. Mhm, mhm. And one question is like, and actually I talked about it in the latest episode of the Black Globe podcast, food.
Mm.
So is it, especially in Grenada, um, like accessibility of food, quality of food? Like when I was in Costa Rica, what struck me as I was in Puerto Viejo and um, seeing like the banana trees. And I
Hmm.
never seen like an actual, I was like, wow, banana trees. And this guy came with a machete and just cut it down and took like what, would be the equivalent of like 40, $50 worth of bananas. But it was so cool. Like, oh, wait, you don't have to go to the store. Like, you can live off the land. So, is that like, how are you finding, food, quality, availability, all those things?
Yeah, so if I'm going to be honest, like that's the next adjustment, the next surrender
Mm.
to the reality of what food here is. I'm still like wishing I could get some Vietnamese food. I'm dying for some Thai food. Like there, I think the picture postcard image of Grenada, like, yeah, I mean, it's abundant. There's plantain, all sorts of bananas, pineapples, mangoes dropping on the floor. Like the amount of mangoes that you see on the floor, like if that was in US dollars, you'll be like laughing.
Right?
But the reality of cooking from scratch is you don't realize it. Like in the UK and in the US, like the ability to like buy a veggie burger that you can just put in the oven
Mhm.
or whatever, like things are kind of partially done. And really, I mean, I'm showing it what a bad cook I am, but I like some help when it comes to the kitchen. Whereas here, if you want to live off the land, it literally means doing everything from scratch, which is beautiful, but
Mhm.
I'm not yet there. There's a bit of resistance on my part. But yeah, like, and also it's about adjusting to eating seasonally.
Mm.
So at certain times of the year, there can be tons of avocados. And my son offered to bring guacamole to his school Christmas dinner. And then we realized that avocados were barely in season. So we had to drive around the island trying to find an avocado. Um, so it definitely is an opportunity to be more in tune with the land. And
Mhm.
those folks who like cooking from scratch and growing their own food, like it's gonna light you up. But it
Mhm.
can be an adjustment to just not be able to buy exactly what you want when you want it. It's funny when I talk to other folks who've moved to the Caribbean, food is the conversation that we have the most. And we say we can't say it out loud because people are going to think we're just complaining. But when you experience it, it can be a little destabilizing.
Yeah, because it can be an adjustment to, even conceptualize like, oh, there's a seasonality, especially in the
Hmm.
States. When I was growing up, there was a seasonality to certain availability of fruits and vegetables. Now that's not the case.
Right.
Yesterday, I went shopping in Trader Joe's, and one avocado was 2.99.
Wow.
Rashawn did not buy an avocado, but I'm just letting you know, like it's, so the cost of things have gone up sky high, inflation, we're all feeling it collectively. But one of the things that I've also found to be true is, um, like things actually, fruits and vegetables, going spoiling after a few days versus, me going to the store, I know that it'll hold for a week. That's not normal.
Mhm.
And so just being able to go to a land that, you don't have, as many harsh pesticides and just the ability to experience just that difference because you can taste it. I mean, your taste buds, at
Yeah.
least mine, they light up. And then I come back and I'm like, oh no. Like,
Yeah, and also the other thing here is like so many. If you're renting a house or buying a house, So many places come with a plot of land. So really the opportunity to grow your own food is really there. And sometimes I complain like, oh, the broccoli was expensive. I'm like, why am I complaining? If I really wanted it, I could just grow it, you know? So it does provide you with solutions. It's just up to you whether you take them or not. I'm yet to take that opportunity.
Exactly. And I want to be respectful of your time. So I know we're winding down. I want to get to like the last questions or two. How's the atmosphere for young women hanging out as girls at night without men thinking you're trying to pick them up? Or is that, or that is a non-alcohol oriented cafe? So more or less just the safety aspect for, young women, young girls to be walking around at night.
Yeah, I mean, Grenada is safe. That issue of walking around at night as a woman, I don't feel that as. I mean, obviously, you bring a sense of reality to it. You wouldn't necessarily like walk on the beach on your own at 3 in the morning. But I
Mm.
think yeah, like without men thinking you're trying to pick them up. Um, I'm wondering if the men would give you space to think that you're trying to pick you up without trying to pick you up. Um, but yeah, I think folks hang out. It's. I don't know if I fully understand the question, but
Yeah, I think it's probably around, again, just I always refer to like my own experiences. One of the unfortunate things I can remember from my childhood was just, and I remember I was like in my teens, just walking into the mall and like, oh, you baby, and,
that
advances. Um, and thankfully, my daughter does not have those challenges. So I'm guessing, and let me know if I got that incorrect. That the question was really just being able to move about without, having
okay.
those
Yeah,
things.
yeah. Well, I mean, no, I think how would I explain it? I think the men here do comment. They do comment. I wouldn't say it's like sexually aggressive, but that's like
Mm,
I'm a 41 year old. If I was like a hot 18-year old, it's different. But I think also it's um my perspective is that sometimes women from overseas take it very seriously,
mm,
whereas it's just like it's not anything. It's not actually like an emperor. It's just a pastime. Like there's like an 80-year-old guy. He like says funny stuff to me. And he's probably been saying stuff since he was 12 years old. I think the way that I handle it is just like respond like, oh, thanks, hi, and then they stop.
got
If you ignore them, that's when they're like, oh, why are you talking? But it's not sexually aggressive. It's just what in the UK what we call banter or chat or just a pastime. That's my perspective.
mm.
A lot of women disagree with me, and when guys say stuff, they'll call them out on it. But my perspective is I don't. It doesn't bother me that I just find it funny, entertaining.
Right, goes along for the ride.
Yeah.
Um, so Zoe, as we start to close, um, can you let people know like how they can follow you, potentially work with you, and loop in?
Yeah, definitely. Well, the best place to start, I would say, is YouTube, which is YouTube/, The Exodus Collective, or just type in The Exodus Collective or Zoe Smith, and the videos there should pop up. And it's really just a way for you to kind of work your way through all the different stories, all the different ways of moving. Some people say you need everything on an Excel spreadsheet and have 6 figures in the bank, and then you can think about moving. I have an interview coming out with a woman who moved to Jamaica with a tent. You know, some people, right? You think you need an Airbnb, you think you need a deposit down. Like, no, she's like, me and my 7-year-old daughter, we're moving to Jamaica, and my
Oh,
accommodation is a tent, right?
wow.
Yeah,
That is
yeah.
awesome. Oh my gosh, I want to hear
Yeah,
it.
you have to check it out. It's such a beautiful interview. And yes, there's just you know yourself, you know what you need to do, and the way will be whatever it is that you need to do. And just to understand that, to see it again and again and again, it can look like whatever it needs to be. So I recommend the YouTube channel. Um, if you want practical tips on moving, you can check out the Exodus.co, which is the website. It has a forum for all of the 15 CARICOM islands. If you're thinking about moving to Grenada, you can check out the workshop that I held recently. And we also have a weekly live Q&A session, so people can come and talk to me, but more importantly, talk to each other. So there's this whole collective of people who are moving, who know each other, and who are going to have a sense of community. And there's also a workshop for St. Kitts. And also, if it's just a more general chat, you can book a one-on-one session with me. So yeah, there's a whole range. But I definitely recommend starting with the YouTube channel because it's free and there's just lots of inspiring stuff out there.
Yes, yes. And listen to Zoe's episode on the Blaxit Global podcast from season 3.
Listen to that again. I remember what I was like back then. See if anything has enough changed.
Right? It's like, and I love, being able to have the YouTube channel because it gives me an opportunity to like make these like reconnections and updates. And so I definitely get a lot of out of these conversations, on the podcast, on this platform. I know we have one last question. Was it for a place to hang out for women in their 30s to 50s? Is that like, I guess it's into like, I don't know, maybe not nightlife, but just things to do. So that would be definitely something to check out. Goes back to what Zoe was saying. So it's like think about what your habits are. Think about what you want your life to be. Is it some place that you want to have that's walkable, quality of care, healthcare, affordability? It sounds like, there are lots of options for you in the Caribbean. Definitely loop in with the Exodus Collective. Follow Zoe. She's also on Instagram. Like I said, listen to the episode, go on her YouTube channel because she is a wealth of information and always a pleasure.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. I love what you're doing with the Blaxit Global and the Blaxit. It's showing no sign of stopping, is it? So
Nope.
it's
Nope.
definitely needed.
It's definitely needed. I'm honored to be in this space and make my contributions, and also to honor the work that you're doing, which is so fabulous. Because a rising tide lifts all boats. Together we have these platforms. We work together to help inspire and encourage people to think outside the box. Because the promised land is there and it is attainable. And so, stories like this and opportunities to have these conversations, to ask questions and have your questions answered is really important. So thank you.
So it's been a real pleasure. Thank all of you in the audience for your questions too. Good
Yeah,
luck moving wherever you end up.
exactly. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank you.